This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios Podcast Network. Welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast. My name is David, and I am trying to be the Graceful Atheist. Thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. If you too would like an ad-free experience of the podcast, become a patron at patreon.com/gracefulatheist. If you're in the middle of doubt, deconstruction, the dark night of the soul, you do not have to do it alone. Join our private Facebook group, Deconversion Anonymous, and become a part of the community. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/deconversion. Remember, there is a merch shop. You can get your t-shirts and mugs with Graceful Atheist and Secular Grace themed items on it. The links will be in the show notes. Special thanks to Mike T for editing today's show. On to today's show. Arlene interviews this week's guest, Mary Burkhart. Mary is a life coach helping people through deconstruction with her company, Remission. Mary grew up apostolic Pentecostal. She had some very traumatic experiences in her young life. Later in life, she began to work in the tech part of the church and saw how the sausage was made behind the scenes. And eventually, her questions piled up beyond her ability to continue her faith. Today, Mary is helping other people process their deconstructions. You can find Mary on Instagram at religion_in_remission, and there'll be many links for her work in the show notes. Here is Arlene interviewing Mary Burkhart.
Mary Burkhart, welcome to the Graceful Atheist Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm sure it's the almighty algorithm of Instagram that said, you may like this account. And so I started following you, and I'm no longer a Christian, no longer a believer, and I have an okay religious background. Like, I didn't have a whole lot of crazy because I did not grow up in it. But I loved the resources that you were putting out there, the questions you ask, you're just like curious. And so anyway, I love what you're doing, and I want to hear all about religion and remission. But first, Mary, tell us about the religious environment that you grew up in.
Sure. I grew up apostolic Pentecostal, and
Oh, wow.
that is, that's usually the response that I get. Very, very churchy.
Yeah.
You know, church many days out of the week. So when I was born into it. My mom, she's been in it since she was 12, and I say been in it because she's still in it. And my dad was also very heavy into it as well. In his later years, he's very religious, but he doesn't really go to church anymore, just because of health reasons. But he's definitely very, very much a believer. But I grew up apostolic Pentecostal, and when you think about the connotations that come along with that, running around the church and Holy Ghost filled, and you know, all kinds of speaking in tongues and what they call crazy cult stuff, it kind of comes along with that. And being at church so much, dedicating a lot of your time to the church. My mom was very, very devout and into, you know, us serving in whatever capacity we could. She was very close with the pastor, which was a woman, and her daughter. Yeah, right. It was the pastor being a woman was very rare, because they didn't, you know, it was not very big on women pastors back then. And I'm an 80s baby, so I mean, it wasn't terribly far away, but it was definitely still close enough to where they didn't think that women should be leaders over a flock. And so we were in church, I mean, Monday I try to remember the order of things, but I know Monday was like cleaning the church after Sundays, Tuesdays, a prayer meeting, Wednesdays was Bible study. I think we had maybe Thursday was choir rehearsal, and then Fridays we had off. And then Saturdays we go clean the church for Sunday. And then Sunday we were in church all day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was just that deep. And so my devotion to religion and to God, to the Christian God, I'll say, came very early in my life. And but I don't, while it's hard, right? Because indoctrination is definitely, it's a difficult being. It's a difficult beast to deal with. Um, I've learned not to live my life with a ton of regrets or resentment towards it, because it really did shape me into who I am. You know, we have to take our experiences and make it work for us. It's fuel, you know, and we can either let it destroy us or we can let it make us better. As I got older, I mean, even though I didn't really understand fully the devotion and the things that were happening, the vows that I was saying, and you know, the commitments that I was making, I meant them. You know, I didn't know what came with them, but I was still very committed, and I was testifying in church at 5 and 6 years old. And I remember I was just so moved, you know, because, and in retrospect, obviously, because at 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, what do you really know about this huge system of religion? But I was so moved because I would see everyone else moved, you know, and I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of the spirit. I wanted to be a part of the environment. And I took it very seriously. There was just a lot of mimicry because I wanted to make sure that I fit into that mold. And so it was around 5 years old that I started being sexually abused. And it was by my godbrother. His mom had died, and he was in his teens. And it was it was difficult, obviously, you know, for the obvious reasons, but it was confusing. And more so when everything came out, because my brother was the one I confided in. And I asked him not to say anything. But of course he did. And I was very happy that he did, because it stopped everything in its tracks. And come to find out, he was also abusing some of my cousins. But what happened with the church at that time was I was called a liar, and I was completely demonized, and I was shamed. I was I was just talked about so badly as a child. I was not believed at all, and had no frame of reference, you know, for where this stuff would even come from. I'm just telling what happened. And my mom, she asked if I wanted to take it to court. And I told her yes.
So your family, your mom believed you.
Oh, absolutely.
Just not, but not church.
Church, yeah, no. My mom 100% believed me. And it was a kind of a split thing. My parents had split by the time everything came out. And my dad he believed me, but he was of the mindset that he's just a kid. You know, he's a teenager. We don't want to ruin his life, and let's just, you know, deal. But that typical church response, you know what I'm saying? That typical, let's sweep it under the rug so that it can happen to someone else, essentially, you know. But I told my mom I wanted to go to court. And we were pretty much excommunicated and ostracized by our church. It was hard for me because I still didn't understand the depth and the scope of religion itself. All I knew was what they told me, and that was that God was love, and that he was supposed to, you know, his people love us. You know, we're supposed to love each other and believe each other and trust each other. And when that happened, I was totally confused. We won our case, and I just think that the scars were a little bit too deep for my mom at that point, because, like I said, she's been in it since she was 12, and she loved her church family. So for that to happen, you know, and it's funny because even now saying it, I don't think I ever really took the time to think about how deeply that part hurt her, you know, because she had been in it way longer than we had. But that was in New Jersey, and she took us and moved us to North Carolina for a fresh start.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a few years later. And so I grew up the latter part of my years for the next 20 years in North Carolina. And we continued going to church. We found a church in North Carolina, same apostolic, Pentecostal, very, very traditional, churchy, running around the church, speaking in tongues, and she was home,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't go back immediately, but I started following her when I was about 16. And it was a few times off and on from like 14 to 16. And then I committed completely. But even though we were away from the church in that time, we never stopped believing. We always
Yeah.
had those core beliefs of Jesus Christ as the Savior and, death, burial, resurrection. He is God in the flesh and all that. And when I started really committing myself to my religion, I don't do things half-assed. So I'm like, I'm going to commit, and I'm reading and I'm searching and I'm researching, and I loved it. I found that same kind of naive love that I had when I was about, 5 and 6 again. And with the people that I felt like were family, and, spiritual brothers and sisters. And we were able to make friends and, make connections. And then it was probably, I started shortly after I went back to church on the sound ministry. And I completely loved it. I'm very technical, so that's something that always sticks with me wherever I go. But when you start in the technical aspect of things and you get behind the scenes, you start to see a lot more of the ins and outs of how a religion and a church functions. And you start to see things unravel. You start to see that people are not what they say they are. They don't believe as heavy as they say that they do. They have flaws, and you don't think anyone's perfect, but they're not practicing what they preach. And for me, I guess having that gap between, the adolescent years and the teen years, that those preteen to young teen years, I missed kind of that transition, in church that you get when you realize these things younger and you just still go with the flow. You're just like, okay, well, this is just kind of how it is, right? So I had a naivety as an older teenager, almost an adult, into my young adult years, thinking that, well, we're all the same. We're all serving God the way that he wants us to. We're all making these sacrifices. We're all doing the same things and reading our word and going to church. And we all love this, the same God, the same way. It was just not the case, and that was a hard realization for me as well. But seeing those same kinds of, the same kind of ugliness surface that I noticed when I was younger. And it was, I think I was going to college, and I was just talking to this guy who he wasn't a believer at all. And he just asked a really silly question about, can God make a boulder that's too heavy for him to lift?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
And I was like, no, yes. It was a weird question. And I always say it's the dumbest question, but it really did throw a monkey wrench at me. And it kind of started to chip away at what I now understand is critical thinking. Things are not always black and white. Things are not always easily answered. And I don't remember the guy's name, but I'll always be grateful to him for that simple little crazy question. As things do, once you start to employ certain strategies, critical thinking, and you don't look at things the same way. It's like, well, what if this isn't, or what if this is, or, how do I go about this in a different way? So people always ask me, like, why did you leave the church? That's what they want to know. Why did you leave? Why did you leave?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just want some really simple answer, like, oh, I was hurt. It's like, no, most people don't leave the church because they're hurt. They don't leave because they're, it's like hurt. Okay, you deal with feelings and emotions like an adult the same way you do whether you're in or out of the church. It's not about being hurt. It's not about hurt feelings. You leave because things keep compiling. Things keep compounding. That's why, because they continue to be unresolved and they keep compiling. And you're trying to resolve inconsistencies. You're trying to resolve the backbiting that you're seeing. You're trying to resolve the lack of love and compassion that you're seeing. You're trying to resolve these inconsistencies and contradictions in your holy text. And it's like, okay, so, if I can't get answers here about this, there's no answers for this. There's no answers for this. There's no, and things just really start piling up. You don't really have a choice at that point, but to, serve your cognitive dissonance and one way or the other, right? So you're either going to turn inwardly to your religion and say, okay, I'm just going to ignore all of this over here and just continue to trust and have faith. Or you're going to say, no, I need to know. And I feel like I deserve to know if there's more truth out there. So you turn outward and you say, I never knew that my exit from religion would lead me to atheism. I never knew. I had no idea. When I left the church, I thought I was leaving that church. That was it. That was it for me. I was like, okay, I'm just done. When I left the church, I tried other churches. I didn't try other religions, but I did go non-denominational so that I could, I'm just like, okay, let me see. But it was just more of the same. It was just more. And so I left religion altogether, and I didn't even leave God. I was still a believer, and it was just, it took time to really unravel and deconstruct my religious experiences. And the more research that I did, the more of my understanding that came through. That is when I made the decision that I do not believe in a God, in any God. And so it's people always want that simple answer. Why did you leave? It's not simple. It's really not. I mean, you can say, well, I joined the church and, I did for this reason, it's not, but it's usually not simple for why you join a church either, unless you were like, okay, I was born into it, but why did you stay? Because it's more complicated than that. So a lot of believers, they want to know why you left, right? They want to know, why did you leave? Because they're looking for some hole in why you left. Why did you, you must have been hurt. Someone must have said something. So no, it's just as difficult to leave a religion as it is to stay. Yeah, it's totally difficult, in the little cliched adage about the road to atheism being littered with Bibles, which I always change to holy text because it's true. It doesn't matter what religion you're coming from. Most people who have been indoctrinated into religion or have been devout to a religion for a specific, number of years have tried to find answers within their religion first.
Yes.
Before they
absolutely.
leave. And it's not happening. And there's a reason for that, So in my own coaching, I never tell people you shouldn't believe, and I think a lot of people think that's what I do. I don't turn people away from their religion. And as a matter of fact, there have been several potential clients that I have told, you might need to go back to your religion and see if you can get these answers because you seem to be confused about why you don't believe, and no one can give you that why. You have to figure that out for yourself. So, telling people not to believe or to leave religion, that is not what I'm here for. That's something that we all have to come to on our own.
I haven't had a lot of people ask, like, why did we leave? And sometimes I'm like, just ask me. I will talk to you. Just ask me. Like family hasn't asked a whole lot. But yeah, you're right. Like, I didn't leave because I wanted to sin or because I was hurt. Like I said earlier, like our church life was pretty easy. It wasn't too bad. My husband deconverted. And so that sent me on a journey. He realized he couldn't believe. So I was like, oh my God, what do we do? So then I'm like, reading everybody I had not read yet who's a Christian. I was reading Catholic people. I was reading like these people that used to be off limits. And I was like, no, it's just the church is getting bigger to me. Holy Spirit's bigger. I was just learning. I had no idea it was going to lead me to be an atheist. And it was just a long trail of like learning and learning and learning. And then eventually going, this doesn't quite hold up like I thought it did.
Yes.
And the things, and for me, there was also a lot of mental health stuff. And so realizing that like praying was stressing me out because I didn't know if God was going to help me or not.
Yes.
Like that anxiety, and finally just being like, I'm just not going to pray about stuff. It was like my brain cleared up a little bit. Like it was so bizarre. So yeah, there's no easy answer, and it takes a long time. It's not, and for my husband, it was very emotional. For me, I was just like, I don't think this is true anymore. So then, of course, I get the thing, well, it was just head knowledge. No, baby. Yeah. If you saw my journals, it was like the real deal the whole time. Anyway, I've talked a lot, but go ahead. So
no, it's, I totally get what you're saying. And, that whole spiritual bypassing that they love to do when it comes to, your journey, the no true Scotsman fallacy about, you were never really a believer. I'm like, listen, I don't have anything to prove to anybody. And then that's not why I do what I do, but it's always funny to me when they're like, well, you were just never really a believer. You were never truly a Christian if you could leave so easily. And I'm like, unfortunately for you, I was more Christian than you were.
Oh man.
I have spent so many hours on my knees praying. I have gone to so many prayer meetings, so many tears, waiting, just fasting, feet washing. Okay. Like I was in it all the way, and I believed all the way. Journals, thick, notebooks full of knowledge and just studying material that I used to sit at the front. I remember when I was old enough to go to the adult Bible study, I was still ready. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And I was just, and then the adult Sunday school, because my pastor taught it. And I'm like, I just want to know, I want to know what's going on. I have to get this information. And I used to look at the Bible as something that was so dynamic. Like, how could you just read one scripture and then it can be interpreted so many different ways? I thought I loved to read, and then I left religion and I started reading more philosophy and psychology, and I was like, oh, but you can do that with anything. It's
Yes. I'm just about to be 40, and it just dawned on me a few months ago that I can highlight other books and like take away really great, insightful things from fiction and nonfiction with all my little highlighters, like I used to do in my Bible. Like I can learn from all these people, and you can get it from so many different places.
You can get it from, just like music, right? And that's a big one.
Yes.
The big thing that I really try to drive home with a lot of my my clients, my friends, my family, whatever it is, whoever I'm talking to, music is huge, but it's the psychological tactics of religion, right? They know what they're doing. That's why there's a song for everything. Music evokes emotion. And when you really start to understand how, down to a science, religion has it, it's really predatory. We are emotional beings, and religion understands that. Think about when you go to the store. We buy with emotions first, and then we rationalize later.
Yes.
That's how religion is. We will join religion. We will, we dive in head first, and then we rationalize it later. So when we're talking about giving, let's talk about tithes, right? There's this music, a tone of music that's played. There's certain scriptures that are used to evoke emotion and say, would a man rob God? And, are you gonna, how are you gonna bring in, your 10% or whatever into the storehouse? Give until to God's people. And I remember my pastor used to say, don't give until it hurts, give until it stops hurting. And I always thought that was first of all, that was so brilliant, because you're like, wait, do I give more or do I give less?
I'm like, what does that mean?
So, it's really up to your interpretation of what that means. But it was always meant for you to give more, essentially, take the sacrifice, take the leap, trust God, and there was always, it never failed. There was always a situation in the church where I personally would see and experience people trying to decide between whether to pay their bills or whether to pay their tithes. And I always thought that was so hard. I was one of them at one point. I was like, man, what do I do? How am I going to, because you're supposed to trust. It's all about faith, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is one of the most difficult things. It's easy for people who are wealthy, it's like, okay, here's my whatever. It's just, but if you're working and trying to make your ends meet, it's tough. It's a tough decision to make. When I was more faithful and devout, it was an easy decision, but I would suffer because of it. And I'm just like, I couldn't understand, I would see people who needed help from the church and then they couldn't get it. And I'm like, wait, but isn't that what we're here for? To help people? Aren't we supposed to be, and like I said, being in the background and behind the scenes and seeing how things work, then I also started hearing, oh, well, if you don't pay your tithes, you can't get help. I'm like, what about the community? What about the Bible says that we're supposed to help. That's what we're here for. That's what the church is established for, to help the world, to help the community. And it just really came out that there was agenda, and then the more that I started going to other churches, the more that I started researching and even helping people and talking to people, the more I find out this is a theme. It wasn't just my church, it wasn't just my religion. It's a theme throughout religion. And the compassion that religion is supposedly built on just doesn't exist. It's all a business.
Yeah.
And that's where, it makes it easier for me, but it also made it more difficult in the beginning, because it's like my soul, I was like, my soul is just a business. My soul, what about that? What about that is okay? Where I'm really trying to strive and get to, this heaven place. And it doesn't seem like that really is the goal of church anymore. It just kind of seems like this is all a transaction. And it was difficult and it's hard, but I wouldn't change it, honestly, just for me, the way that I went about everything, because I went with all my heart. And that's one thing I tell my clients, like, your intention matters, because there's always a lot of regret, things that I wish I didn't do, I wish I didn't say, places I wish I wouldn't have gone. But intention matters, and it's not your fault that you were exploited. That's not your fault.
Yes.
You have to understand that. And it's a difficult time. But if you can push beyond that guilt and that shame, and that's what, I deal with a lot with people, it gets better. We have to learn to shed that, because our intention was not to, exploit others or bring others into a system that we thought, was horrible. It was to help people. And to really think that, man, we're bringing them into a system of salvation, that this is the only way that they're going to be able to get to heaven and to save their soul, to make their life better. That's intention. And, it falls on us, because now we are the ones who are deconstructing, and we're the ones who've walked away, but we understand better. You know better, you do better. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
Yeah, that's very true. So how did you get from, so let's see, Christian to not real sure about church to still believe in God, but then started reading? How'd you get into philosophy? Was that just, you just started reading other stuff, or?
I always loved the concept of philosophy, but I never really was like, oh, let me just read Nietzsche, let me just open this up, let me read a little bit of Aristotle, But honestly, it really was just that I wanted to understand different schools of thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool.
I honestly, I just picked up a book on philosophy one day, and it was, the first philosophy book. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't even remember. It was some existentialism book, Epicurean, I think that's actually what it was. But I was so fascinated because I was like, wait, this makes so much sense, and just how we view life under religion. Let's search for the right word. It's so concrete, right? It's like, okay, we have a goal. We have to live every facet of our being around this goal. We are working towards heaven. We're working towards salvation. We're working towards saving souls. That is our goal. Then you start reading different schools of thought and philosophy, and it's like, what if life means nothing?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What if all this actually means shit? What if this means nothing? What if I don't mean anything? It's really mind blowing. And I love that experience that I had when it came to philosophy. What if none of this matters? What if I die and there's nothing but void? How does that work? And it's hard, right? It's hard realizations. We don't ever know what's after death, but we have speculations. Everyone has even religion has speculations. They don't know for sure. They're going off of what they've been told. But even in the Bible, it says like, your people can't come back to you and tell you. They can't warn you. So, don't expect that. So what kind of a surety do you really have that, an afterlife exists? But I think the existentialism part of philosophy has always been the most fascinating part for me, because one of the biggest takeaways was that religion, and a lot of people don't like when I say this, but a religion is for people who are terrified of their own mortality. They have to have some kind of guarantee that there's something else out there. We cannot stand the thought that all of this just ends. And part of understanding that all of this just ends is okay begins with understanding that all of this isn't actually great in the first place. But it's like, even if your life is good, that's awesome. But think about the state of the world everywhere else. Yeah. But we get so much tunnel vision when we're in religion. And it's, I always use the example of a 12-car pileup. Oh, God is so good. There was a 12-car pileup, but I walked away. Every other person involved is gone, but I'm good. So God is good. What?
I remember some lady at the library, we're library frequenters, and she was talking about how when the storms came through recently, she was like, and not a tree fell, like God was so faithful. And I was like, and this was when I was still a Christian, and I just said, 2 trees fell in our yard. Like, what does that mean about our house? Like, and she didn't know how to respond. Yeah. I'm like, what did God just it sounds so presumptuous.
Right.
Like it sounds so presumptuous.
It really is though. At its core, that's what it is. I mean, you talk about, I remember the hurricane, Katrina, and or any hurricane really, they're like, oh, the cross is still standing.
Or the Bible that survived the
The
flooding
fire,
or something.
right? Or the fire.
Yes.
Because if you actually look into it, the Bible's actually made of like flame retardant material, and the thickness of it's going to take a lot longer to burn. But we don't think about that. We just think, oh, well, you know, it's something that has God's name on it, so it had to be preserved. But you know, it's like this hurricane came through this town and killed 1,100 people, but the cross is still standing. So God is still good. And it's like, no, no, actually not.
No.
But yeah, if you ever notice, like a funeral, let's just say, and it happens a lot. I'm not gonna say a lot of funerals, but you know, I notice the pattern a lot for people. It's like when someone dies, we lost 3 people very close to our family: my uncle, my aunt, and my brother. And every single time there was a funeral, everyone's like, oh, you know, family's so important. We got to stick together. We got to do more. And, you know, this, you know, God is so good. And I'm just like, now at this point, when we lost all 3 of them, I no longer was a believer. So for me, I'm trying not to be cold and just tell everybody, like, listen, this is going to pass. You're just afraid of your own mortality. This death has just brought your mortality closer to you. And so that's all that's happening, is that you're once again faced with the fact that life ends. That's really all it is, you know, and this is going to pass. You know, right now you're just speaking from a place of fear. I wish it was, you know, real. I wish that you guys really wanted to stay in contact as family, but you know, this is just really, it's all fear-based. And, you know, but these are the most religious people, right? Because they're responding in kind to the way that they serve religion, in fear. They're serving in fear.
Elaborate. What do you mean? I don't think I understand.
They're responding in kind to the death of a loved one, the same way that they serve religion, which is fear-based.
Oh, they're just, I see.
Yeah, yeah. So it's consequence, right? So a lot of people, they say, oh, well, you know, I love God, I love this, I love that. So is it really love if you can't take your love away without consequence?
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you serving your God seriously in full truth and love and devotion because there's consequences if you don't? Or, you know, it's hard, but that's a difficult question because it's hard for people to say, well, yes, I am, but how do you know? Because there are consequences. You know, it's not love if there's consequences for removing your love away. You know, for taking your side of the equation. Yeah, for taking your side of the equation. If you have to burn for, you know, leaving and saying, you know, I'm out of here, this is not for me, is it really unconditional love? Is it really, you know, is it really unconditional love? And can you honestly say that you're serving fearlessly? I couldn't. I mean, some people might be able to say that they are, but I couldn't say that it wasn't fear-based for me. It was totally fear-based. It's like, wait a minute. This makes total sense to me now, you know, because especially being indoctrinated into it from a child, I had such irrational fears of hell, such irrational fears.
Yes.
You know, and anybody who was brought up Baptist, any kind of, you know, really like deep Pentecostal roots, you at one point in your life thought you were left behind. You went to the church and no one was there. You came home and everybody was gone, or everybody was asleep or whatever. Nobody was answering their phone. You thought you missed the rapture, you know.
We weren't taught the rapture stuff.
Yeah.
But I have heard so many people on the podcast talk about that. Like they turned around in Target and couldn't find their mom and start panicking. And I'm like, I cannot imagine being a little kid and like having this experience.
That's the first thing that comes to your mind as a child.
Yes. Rather than like, oh, I stepped away and she's on the toy aisle. Like,
right.
Yeah.
That oh my gosh, God doesn't love me. I'm left behind, you know.
Oh my heavens. So tell me, now that you are a flaming crazy atheist who has you can't have meaning in life, you can't have hope, you can't have any of
No
those
morality.
things. Nope, you're not a moral person. How do you find your hope and your meaning these days?
Oh man, that's good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love philosophy, and I'm really about, you have to own your own life. You have to own your own existence. I mean, I think nihilism to a great extent is blurring the lines of absurdity, because, you just, yeah, okay, a lot of things don't matter, conceptually, but you give your life meaning. You
Yes,
decide
I
what
like
you're
that.
living for. You decide what's important to you. I'm married to a wonderful man. I have a daughter who's about to be 6 years old in a couple weeks. I'm pregnant with my second, and I work very hard to take care of my family, and I relish the time that I get to spend with them, the memories that we make. That is what gives my life meaning. Helping people through my coaching is one of the things that gives my life meaning. I can't speak for everyone else, but you have to find what makes you happy, and you have to go after that. It's easy to sit back and say, well, life doesn't mean anything, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But at that point, I mean, you're just resigned to just exist. And that's, I mean, if that's what you want, sure. But, for me, I feel like this is the only life that we get. You have to make it mean what you want it to mean. You have to, and yes, there's system, especially in the United States, this country is not set up for us to win, right? But there are ways to live a great life and to enjoy life, and if the homeless person on the street can have a smile on their face and be so loving, I know I can too. I have a lot to be grateful for. I work hard, and it's about finding your passion, serving in that. Like my passion is the coaching. I didn't have this when I started deconstructing. Yes. And I wish that there was something like this available, because my journey through deconstruction was very dark in the beginning. I didn't realize that I was lacking a whole lot after I left the church. And I almost took my life. It was a very hard time, because the things that I work to help people recognize on their own journeys are the things that I wish somebody would have told me, And I've been deconstructing for over 15 years, and it's gotten a lot better, but having to do it on my own. And there are people who don't survive it, because religion is so much one of the heaviest pieces of the country here in the United States, and in a lot of other countries too. So you'll have people who unfortunately have taken it a step further and have ended their life, because you get family rejection, you get you get all kinds of self-hate, and you don't understand emotions and things you don't understand because of the way that indoctrination and religion weaves itself into your life. It's hard. It's so difficult. So if I can help people, steer them away from that ledge and say, what you're feeling is normal. What you're feeling will get better. What you're feeling has a remedy. That makes me happy. That gives my life some purpose, on a certain level, because I do enjoy helping people. But man, being able to steer people away, that's invaluable, and I have a heart for that, because again, those psychological tactics, we don't know what's happening to us when we're indoctrinated. We think we're just serving in religion. We think we're just doing, what comes with it. We're being manipulated, and it's hard. It's a hard thing to unravel. So, as far as of course, morality. I mean, obviously we're immoral heathens and there's no, there's no basis for morality if you're an atheist. But I always think that's so funny because morality predates Christianity.
Yeah.
So it's just so funny that they're like, oh, well, it's, you can't have morals if you're not a Christian because God is the ultimate authority of morality. And I'm like, no, not really though.
Yeah. And let's open the Bible and pull out some morality from different
genocide.
Parts. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's perfectly infanticide, like all the sides,
right? Rape and
all of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, you were talking about your coaching, so tell us all about Religion and Remission. Tell us what you're doing.
So Religion and Remission is my coaching program. I've been, it's my coaching business. I've been coaching for over 2 years now, and I absolutely love it. It's helping to see people, helping people to see themselves in a better light. Because we come out of religion with so much darkness and heavy of heart, and just hopelessness sometimes. And anything from you're talking about sexual identity to your human identity, to family rejection, to unsure of how to just view the world. Where do I fit in the world now? What do I do now that I don't have religion? All of these things, they matter, and they're so downplayed in religion. We get into these little bubbles within our religions. And then when you hit the world, you're like, shit, no one prepared me for this. I have no frame of reference. I don't know what to do. And so being able to help people understand that, one, it's completely normal. It happens. It's fine. But two, that there's another side to it. It gets better, because I was so heavy. I was just, man, it took a lot for me to get to a place where I wanted to end my life. And so to come from that and know, like, boom, there's so much better on the other side of it. It's okay. You can get through this, and your life can be so much better than you think, because there's endless possibilities if you decide that you want more. It's about, that's what it's about, so you have to make the decision, like, this is just not my end. I'm not just someone who left religion. I'm actually a human, a whole human, and I can make my life what I want it to be. So I coach people, and I basically, the core of it is helping people to transition out of toxic religion environments, toxic religious environments, and toxic mindsets, because that's really the mind work is what needs to happen before anything else. And one of the things that I definitely harp on is indoctrination. And I coach people who have been in religion a few years to, over 30 years or whatever. It doesn't matter. But indoctrination is so subtle and harsh that I really love to help people unwind that. Because I've said it before. If anyone's heard me, they know I use a rope analogy. Religion reinforces itself. And that's why, people, there's a revolving door. A lot of people will leave religion, but they'll go right back into it, because it really does. It reinforces itself. The rope is made up of little strands that are woven into fibers that are woven, they're tightened around it. So you cannot just break that. That's how indoctrination is in our life. You have to carefully remove these little fibers and strands out from your life, because if you try to do it by like chopping the rope in half or just pulling at strands, you can unravel your entire life. So that's why some people just don't make it. And so it's important that you be careful, you know, when you're unraveling your religious experiences and unpacking them. But the mindset work is so important, and we have to make sure that we're taking the time to do that. A lot of times you see people come out and it's just like one extreme to the next, you know. But if you've been in religion for, I usually say about, you know, 10 years or more in your life, especially if you're an adult and you've been indoctrinated, you have to consider that you've been indoctrinated longer than you've been away from religion.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So you have to be patient with yourself. And that's really the most important part. You can, you know, get frustrated if you want to, but it's not, you have to take your time. It's a process, you know, and it's a lifelong process that we have to commit to. So don't be in a rush, because I was indoctrinated. I didn't leave religion until I was 24. I didn't become an atheist until I was 26. Well, I'm 39. So I've still been indoctrinated longer than I've been away from religion.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, it's a lifelong journey. So, you know, you have to be patient with yourself. But yeah, I have a podcast called Religion and Remission Podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on Buzzsprout. And I interview guests and talk about their own deconstruction and their own religious experiences, or even lack thereof. I am on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you know, it's all over the place for me. And I've been on several podcasts, and it's always been a journey. I'm really grateful for the growth that Religion and Remission has had. And there's a big thing coming in the future, and we'll see, you know, I won't release it here, but right now what's happening with Religion and Remission is I have a 12-week coaching program called Destination Deconstruction. And it's so funny, because I always tell people, like, there is no destination to deconstruction, right? When you're on that path, there's no destination. Don't ever think that you're going to get to a point in your deconstruction where you're like, I'm finished, I'm done, I've completely deconstructed. No, that's never the case. But when you're leaving religion, the destination is to get healthy on that path to deconstruction. So it's about making your way to that healthy start of deconstruction. So in that 12-week coaching program, it's about helping people transform their toxic mindsets and dismantle them so that they can start their deconstruction in a healthy way. And you know, we go into even sexual identity, because it's funny, because I actually even posted about this today, where sexual identity is a huge part of our human identity. So much so that it colors our experiences every day. We don't think about it on that level every day, but, you know, you see someone you're attracted to. But if you see someone that you're attracted to and you've spent years in religion, you're ashamed of that attraction. You're probably beating yourself down, you know? So it's about those nuances of a sexual identity, as well as the big parts, you know, as well as, you know what, I do think that I'm attracted to the same gender, or I do think that I want to explore this more, you know? So in the 12 weeks, it's intense, but we go through a lot of what it takes to get a healthy start to deconstruction. And it's even if you've been away from religion for a while, you know, but you feel like, man, I'm missing something. I need to figure out where I want to start and which direction I want to go in. You know, everybody's welcome to come. So
that's awesome. Do you have any recommendations, books, podcasts, YouTubers, anything that either was helpful on your deconstruction journey, which 10 or 15 years ago, that was a long time ago. Or just now, anything now that you're loving?
Leaving the Fold by Dr. Marlene Winnell. She's awesome. She coined the term religious trauma syndrome. And thanks to her and her work, it really is getting more of a attention that it deserves in the mental health space, because for the longest time, I mean, religion they didn't want to acknowledge that there were mental health issues, but neither did the mental health community. And so it's, you know, now that we're able to get things like religious trauma syndrome in the DSMs, you know, that's huge to acknowledge. and religion may still not acknowledge it fully because it means that they have to acknowledge that there's a problem in the system. But you know, it is definitely worth a read. Podcasts. I love Matt Dillahunty. He's he's awesome. I mean, everybody knows him. Black Nonbelievers has a podcast called In the Cut. And I love Black Nonbelievers. I love Mandisa Thomas. She's awesome. She's the founder of Black Nonbelievers, and I am a part of that. And basically, I mentioned Black Nonbelievers a lot because when being a woman of color, being a Black woman coming out of religion, well, Black people are the most demographic. And so, you know, being a woman of color and not being religious 15 years ago, you know,
that's true.
Yeah. So now it's a lot more, it's becoming more common, but it's difficult to find support. It's difficult to find people who look like you. And it's just like, I don't know what to do. And so when I found Black Nonbelievers about 8 years ago, I was very happy. Because I was like, oh, thank goodness. So I'm not alone in this. You know, it's hard because when you're growing up in a Black household that is extremely religious, everything surrounds that. Everything is about that, you know, whether you're going to church or not, you are a believer, and that's just kind of the end of it. And so being a non-believer in the people of color space, it's been that helps a lot. It helps when you have that kind of representation and the support, you know, around you. So, but yeah, Black Nonbelievers also has a Facebook group and a podcast, and you know, you can always follow Mandisa. They're on Instagram and Twitter as well. Divorcing Religion podcast with Janice Selby. She is, she's awesome. I actually interviewed her on her. She's interviewed me as well on her podcast. She came from a very fundamentalist background as well, very Mennonite and Pentecostal.
Wow.
Yeah, it was her story is beautiful. Yeah, I mean, speaking up with Andrew Pledger, who is also a great one.
He's been on the podcast.
Yeah, okay, he's awesome. And he has, I love his perspective and how he's definitely, because he's a member of the LGBTQ community as well. And so, you know, he definitely promotes that angle to help people who are struggling with it, you know, in that community. So, some really great ones out there. And I mean, if I think of any more, I'll let you know.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was a lovely conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
My final thoughts on the episode. That was a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed getting to know Mary. I've only been following her a little bit on Instagram, but she asks some of the just most curious questions. Like, she really wants to know how people are doing. What are the things that they've struggled with since leaving religion? What do they miss from religion? How are they finding meaning and hope? It's neat to watch and to see people respond on Instagram to her questions. And I know she really has, I was about to say she really has a heart for people, but the Christianese runs deep. But yeah, she has a heart for people. She really wants to help others and not to make them into atheists or make them into anything, but to just empower them to become the people that they want to be, coming out of toxic religious environments. And so it's wonderful to see the work she's doing and the people that she's helping. And thank you again, Mary. It was a fabulous conversation.
The Secular Grace thought of the week is participation. It was interesting that we did not plan to have Daniel and Mary back to back. Both Daniel and Mary talk about the existential dread on this side of deconversion, or even the existential dread that drives religion in the first place. But a very insightful thing that Mary mentioned is giving back as a part of the process of healing, as a part of the deconstruction process. Over the years, we've tried to provide ways for people to participate. Obviously, you can join the Deconversion Anonymous Facebook group and become a part of the community there. We have people like Jimmy, who writes for the blog. Arlene writes for the blog. Arlene does interviews. Mike T does the audio editing. There are lots of other things that you could participate in with the podcast if you are interested. If you have any interest on doing website work, marketing, running a group for the community, any of these things can be a way that you could participate and give back. Beyond the podcast, obviously, there are ways in your community as well. Volunteer, do something that you love, something that makes you feel like a full human being. And that can absolutely be a significant part of growing as a human being and healing from the deconstruction process. Next week, we have Dr. Daryl Ray of Recovering from Religion Foundation, as well as the Secular Therapy Project. Daryl's also written a number of books, including The God Virus and Sex and God. Daryl's a font of wisdom. I think you're absolutely going to love this conversation. Check it out next week. Until then, my name is David, and I am trying to be the graceful atheist. Join me and be graceful human beings. The beat is called Waves by Mackay Beats. If you want to get in touch with me to be a guest on the show, email me at gracefulatheist@gmail.com. For blog posts, quotes, recommendations, and full episode transcripts, head over to gracefulatheist.com. This is the Graceful Atheist Podcast, a part of the Atheist United Studios podcast network.